I believe that the markets were attempting to process a couple things as they kind of floundered into the end of last year and the first day of 2025. The sharp decline in Chinese yields and the somewhat dramatic shift in long-term yields. Given that we recently booked two 20% back-to-back years, I believe there have been some worries about macro because of various events that have occurred in the last few days. I also believe that there has been general profit-taking and a kind of let's wait and see how 2025 is. Will those items continue to be overhangs in your opinion? There is no doubt they do have a positive outlook. Do you think the S&P 500 might reach 7,000 by the middle of the year before possibly declining? Well, you're talking about a 35% annualized pace of increase if we're going to reach 7,000 in less than 6 months. How can we get there then? One thing that viewers should be aware of, in my opinion, is that the strength that we've seen throughout 2024 has not completely vanished just because the calendar year has changed. Even though the Fed is making fewer cuts, tailwinds are still increasing because of its dovish stance. However, I believe that the first of the two significant developments in early 2025 will be the recovery of manufacturing. One of the highest readings in over 2.5 years was posted by ISM Manufacturing. It has essentially been below 50 for almost 3 years. The second is that I believe the labor market may be slowing in some way since the Fed must now return its attention to bolstering the economy, regardless of whether you look at LinkedIn data or ISM employment. This month might be very pivotal, in my opinion, since we are vulnerable due to the emergence of some fears. But I also believe that the same tailwinds are present. It's still a buy-the-dip market, in my opinion. Does this imply that the market's leadership profile will remain consistent with 2024, given that the same themes might be present? We did conclude with the NASDAQ 100 type stocks dominating. However, I am aware that there is a fluctuation between mega-cap growth leadership and then some broader involvement. I believe that the MAG 7, which includes NVIDIA, will be significant holdings because investors will continue to pay for earnings visibility. Well, things should get easier financially this year. Some cyclicals, such as financials and regional banks, industrials, and small caps, are able to report higher earnings growth as a result of improving financial circumstances. Therefore, I believe that this year should see a case for market expansion. Last but not least, I believe that examining something like Bitcoin is still one of the best ways to gauge risk appetite. Additionally, it continues to warn us that this is still a risky market at 97,000. Indeed, it has retained nearly all of its gains since that brief spike above $100,000 in Bitcoin. However, I'm curious about your thoughts on the comparatively high outflow we observed in the BlackRock ETF that owns Bitcoin, and whether it was due to deferred profit-taking into a new tax year or something else entirely. Well, it's difficult to tell. Additionally, I believe that the ETFs are generating an intriguing dynamic in which, for example, if someone purchases a Bitcoin ETF after selling a BlackRock ETF, they are not subject to the 30-day holding period. As a result, I believe that in certain respects, you can see people using basis swaps and advanced tax minimization techniques without really having to worry about the link below. Yes, since we haven't discussed it enough today, and I know you mentioned it, is that ironic? Actually, Jim Cramer isn't present. We usually have to say it at least 27 times in the 9 to 10. All right, so for our audience that may grow a little tired of hearing about NVIDIA all the time, I'll start with the industry as a whole because it was undoubtedly quite popular in 2024. The semi-industry ETF grew by almost 40%, and I believe that and those all outperformed the overall U.S. market. Zoom out, however, and that wasn't nearly as amazing as 2023, when the AI boom first began and everyone was vying for a share of the action. The future of the chip industry does depend on the current level of success. Although its shares have stayed relatively stable over the past 2 months or so, NVIDIA, one of its bellwethers, has seen a 180% increase in value this year. There's no denying that GPU King will continue to rule, but there's still discussion over how long that success will last, which is a fresh storyline for this year. Customers are waiting for the newest Blackwell, which means there is less demand for the present GPU, which is the Hopper iteration, according to recent tests. The following iteration is that. As a result, they may be delaying some of their purchases in order to wait for the next big thing. Additionally, there have been back-and-forth articles on potential delays for the aforementioned Blackwell and subsequent limits on China chips. Investors, however, are obviously unfazed by these worries. Next week's CES, where Jensen Huang and CFO Colette Crest will discuss the future of AI computing and potential financial targets and updates for Blackwell, will be a major driver, outperforming the basket of chip names we discussed, the tsla and the SOXX, NVIDIA, and a number of other AI winners, including Marvell, ARM, Broadcom, and chip manufacturer TSMC, have all performed strongly over the course of the year, giving an average return of over 100%. However, individuals exposed to, example, electronics and the automotive industry have performed better than the rest of the sector. Not too long ago, HP informed us that the PC refresh cycle is simply a slow start, affecting companies like AMD and memory manufacturer Micron. We are aware that their recent guidance was much weaker. Intel had a 60% year-over-year decline just a few weeks ago. 60% of its value was lost in 2024, making it one of the worst, I suppose. Largest decline as a publicly traded corporation in 53 years. Therefore, yes, Intel has a lot of problems, and I would guess that by 2025, you or I will be considering switching to it. Simply said, what will transpire in terms of leadership there? Not to mention the organization of the business itself. Any number, Altera. What will be spun off? How will it be divided? And who will be in charge? Is it going to be divided? Would some individuals actually notice the larger divide that is undoubtedly discussed and conjectured about in terms of design and manufacturing? And I suppose part of the argument, I talked to another chip executive, I guess, who stated that Intel's issue is that they attempted to accomplish too much at once. The argument then goes that Pat Gelsinger, who was from the chip industry, was very knowledgeable about it and had the motivation and ideas, but that didn't work out, particularly when you saw how much money was lost on the manufacturing side and how many other chip makers lagged behind them. They do have a GPU that is simply not competitive with what is currently available on the market, even with their most recent model. CES is coming up, you said. After all, NVIDIA spent a number of quarters in this cycle of, please just tell us that the next thing is huge and it's going to happen and we can, kind of put it on the horizon. What specifically are we waiting for, if anything, in order to hear from Jensen Huang in small doses? Blackwell, that is. The Blackwell volume, then. It's the one for which we are certain that the time is ideal, and that's, you see, that is the short-term driver of the stock. I am aware that you have discussed it. In the upcoming years, a number of ASICs or custom chips may displace this market or alter NVIDIA's dominance. But for the time being, it really depends on the next iteration. Not even after Blackwell, which will likely be Hopper, will there then be any Hopper-related commentary. So it's continuously stoking that fire, isn't it? We're releasing at least one new chip every year, so it's hard for other companies to keep up when NVIDIA is so far ahead. The next big thing is coming, so don't worry. Black ARM, Black delivery and size is currently underway. Yes, at this very moment. Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, will give the keynote address on Monday to begin things off. He is also anticipated to reveal the RTX 5000 series, a significant GPU boost built on the new Blackwell architecture. Currently, NVIDIA's stock is risen around 7% over